Yo, yo, yo! It's your girl Rose Gold, and you are tuned in for another wonderful episode of Heartbreak Hill Podcast. Today, I have a very, very, very special treat. I have the beautiful, amazing Phindile Tshabalala hailing all the way, from Canada, here to discuss with us today mental health in Black children. Now, Heartbreakers, if you don't know already and you haven't been keeping up, I had the opportunity to interview Phindile on another platform a few weeks back. Very, very interesting topic. We talked about issues with psychiatric treatments. Go ahead and listen to that episode if you haven't already. But today, without further ado, Phindile, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Rose. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. I'm so glad that I was able to get on your schedule. I know that there's a lot that you do, but I really wanted to share your expertise with my audience, specifically. Black Mental Health Matters was the platform, that we had spoken on before. And I kind of want to still stick to the mental health topic, but I want to specify it a little bit more, kind of zone in a little bit more into what exactly or how exactly mental health is affecting our Black children. But before we get there, can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself, what educational background you have, and what you do currently today?
Sure, absolutely. So just for a little bit of background, I focus specifically on public health and I specialize in epidemiology. So for the last couple of months, I've been looking more at the public health side of things, focusing on public health in terms of our mental health for our young Black adolescents, how mental health affects them in today's age, with everything that's happening with the internet the way that it is. Obviously, we're experiencing mental health in a completely new way. And so just trying to figure out different ways to address the gap that there is in terms of resources for young Black youth when they are trying to access mental health resources. And then, so I've just basically been doing a lot of freelance work. I work with a lot of people in the community that I live with, looking at ways to support our Black youth because we do live in a predominantly white environment where I am specifically. And so just looking at ways to kind of bring our community together and support them in the best way possible is where my focus is right now.
Wonderful. And then you had told me before that your original studies were in Africa, but then you came here to finish up your studies, or do I have that wrong?
No, you're right. So I am from South Africa. I was born in Zimbabwe, raised, went to primary school, high school in South Africa. And then I had the amazing opportunity to come to Canada to study. And I've been here after completing my degree as well, just, to have that experience, to have been able to say, I've lived abroad, I've experienced a different kind of environment. And it's been amazing to see how different mental health services and the kind of ideas and stigmas around mental health here, because obviously, it's different wherever you are.
For sure.
So yeah, I am still in Canada. It's really great. I miss home a lot though. I'm homesick a lot, especially during the pandemic. It's been very difficult to travel so far away.
Absolutely. I can definitely attest to that. The pandemic definitely did shut down a lot of those traveling opportunities, but hopefully you get to visit home soon, because I think you had told me that last time we talked as well. So I hope that happens soon. Now, when you say that you study or that you support and help with epidemiology, can you just explain a little bit exactly about what that subject matter is for those who's watching who may not know?
Absolutely. So the work that I do in the field of epidemiology initially focused on non-communicable disorders. Okay. So I focused on things like autism spectrum disorder and the array of disorders that are on that spectrum, looking at how it affects the Black body and how the gold standard of testing that we use, how European-centric it is, and how kind of the way in which medicine has been practiced for so long tends to be detrimental to the Black body. That was my focus of study, specifically on how our environment, the socio-cultural, socioeconomic, political, all of those characteristics play into the treatment, management, and diagnosis of certain non-communicable disorders on the Black body.
Gotcha, gotcha. So that's the perfect transition because our topic for today is mental health in our Black children, right? And so just kind of diving a little bit deeper into what you just said. When you say that you were studying and seeing really exactly how these diseases, like autism, for example, and treatments of these different diseases or mental health disorders affect the Black body, what were some of your findings on how um, things like ADHD, for example? What were some of your findings in how those types of diagnoses and treatments affect the Black body in children?
Well, one really simple example is the differentiation between, I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to read studies that look into certain disorders like autism, but one thing that comes up a lot is the difference in diagnosis between boys and girls.
Okay.
Boys are often diagnosed at a younger age than a lot of females, and that translated as well in our research to Black boys and Black females. And that kind of rhetoric that we have continued to perpetuate of Black women are strong and Black women have to kind of put up appearances and don't get to really show what they're experiencing. That came out a lot in the testing because young Black girls are told, be quiet, sit in place. A lot of young girls go undiagnosed for a lot longer because their behaviors have been tailored towards society. So that in itself is something that you wouldn't even consider. That stigma that is put on Black women now comes into play in the Black body when we're talking about medicine and how we're treating the Black body.
Gotcha. That's a very, 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 very astounding revelation because I never paid attention. But even when I think about into my own life, I don't really see Black females diagnosed with autism a lot. And it's not that it's supposed to be a lot, but it's I feel overdiagnoses in some areas and then underdiagnoses in others. So that was a very, very good point. Let me just ask you, growing up, you yourself struggled with mental illness. Specifically, you've mentioned that in our past interviews that you had struggled with depression. I want to just kind of talk about that a little bit. As a teenager, tell me a little bit about when you started to feel that maybe this is a little bit more than having a bad day.
I think I was maybe 13 or 14. And my older sister had just moved out of the house and she was going to university in a different province. And so for the first time, I was without my best friend, like the person that I looked up to my entire life. And it was just my mom and I living in a space together. And she was so busy with work, and I was so busy trying to get good grades and play sports and figure out how to navigate high school on my own. And I recognized the way that certain situations would make me feel compared to my close friends, and how my reactions to certain situations were way more over the top than a lot of people's reactions, or the impact that something would have on me would be completely different to the impact it would have on one of my close friends. And it was at that moment in time, I was like, oh, maybe something is wrong. Why do certain things affect me differently? Why does everything feel so much more volatile? You get told you're a teenager, things are going to feel over emotional, oversensitive, and you kind of attribute it to that. But when you look at the spectrum, you're on the complete opposite end of where everyone else is, and you're just like, wow, something's wrong. I'm different.
Something different. Now, were people bringing your reactions to your attention, or was this like a self-analyzing thing? Like I'm overreacting and they're not?
Oh, absolutely. It was brought to my attention numerous times, but I didn't know what it was. And I thought that I was being attacked, or I was being isolated for being different, or my friends didn't understand. And it resulted in a lot of chaotic behavior. And I hate to say it, and I think about it, I was a horrible teenager. All because I didn't know what I was experiencing. I felt like no one was there to support me. But the result of that really was just, I was a horrible person to be around during like those really early stages of life going into depression.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And so tell me about, so you're experiencing these behaviors, you're starting to notice, okay, and people are bringing it to your attention. Your reactions to things, everything is not an attack. Your reactions are a little bit over the top. You're seeing in yourself, even at a young age, which is amazing, by the way, you're seeing that maybe, I am overreacting. Tell me about the circumstances of you actually being diagnosed.
So it actually happened, I think, 2 or 3 years after I first started recognizing the kind of chaotic being that was my adolescent self.
Mhm.
And I went to my mom and I said, "Something's wrong.
Mhm.
You know something's wrong. Everyone else around me knows something's wrong. Can we figure out what's wrong?" And we went to one of the neurologists at the hospital nearby, and we're like, these are some of the things that I'm presenting with, and listed a lot of behavior that was more associated with my ADHD than my depression at the time.
Okay.
And basically, there was just like this white piece of paper with a bunch of different questions on it, and he was like, fill that out. And I filled it out. 5 minutes later, he was like, she's depressed. I'm going to put her on this. There you go, out the door.
Mhm. So when they gave you the medication, there was no sort of support into how to take it. Well, not, I mean, I know that it came with instructions, but there was no support. There was just like, here's the slip, here's the medicine.
Absolutely. There was no conversation about this is what you've been diagnosed with, this is what that diagnosis means, this
Mhm.
is how you maintain and manage a course of treatment that will help you kind of get through going to school, being a teenager, all
Right.
of that. There was no support. And I think because the person that you would have expected that to come from didn't bring it up, my mom
Mhm.
or my parents or my family didn't feel like it was something that they needed to worry about either. So it was kind of fill up the prescription, take a pill every single day, and that is as much of the conversation as we're going to have.
Hmm. Did you notice a difference when you started taking the medication to your reactions and relationships?
After the first 3 months, that's when I started to notice a difference and
Mhm.
obviously recognize that, oh, I'm feeling a lot calmer. I'm recognizing moments when I'm happy and want to be happy. I'm
Right.
recognizing that I am less possessive than I was before.
Right. Gotcha. And do you remember back then your parents, or maybe even in the work that you do now, do you feel that there is a certain embarrassment or shame that comes when a Black parent has a child that is mentally ill?
Absolutely.
And in what ways does that have you seen that show up? In what ways do parents exhibit that shame? My child is mentally ill.
I think initially it's that other parents see it and they're
Mhm.
bringing it up to your parents. And it's that moment of, oh my gosh, my child is different. I've clearly done something wrong. It's that
Mm.
idea of they've failed as a parent or they haven't lived up to the expectations that society has put on them to be parents and how to raise a child. So it becomes sort of a question of have they failed as a parent or not? And a lot of
Mhm.
the times they do feel that way because their child is diagnosed with depression or anxiety or
Mhm.
ADHD.
Do you think that when you said something very powerful when you said parents connect that diagnoses to their parenting skills? In what ways can parents disconnect themselves from the diagnoses in terms of it's my fault, I made a mistake? How can a parent detach from that? Because, you know, I'm not a parent, but as having experience with raising children, it's kind of hard to not think that what did I do to make my child depressed, or what didn't I do to make them happy, or if they're, I think maybe when it comes to things like depression and anxiety, it's more common versus like something like ADHD. Parents don't really feel like it's something they did, but in those other instances, how can parents disconnect from that?
So I think that the most important thing to remember is, and this is something that I live by, and I'm sure a lot of people do, knowledge is power. If you are willing to take a step back to listen to your child and recognize that they're living with this disorder, learn about it, learn to understand it. Why is it something that your child is presented with? When you have that full knowledge and understanding of what depression is, it's very easy to recognize, oh, this isn't something that is directly related to me as a parent, to the way that I've brought up my child. Not to say that the way in which you raise a child doesn't affect their mental health. It absolutely does.
Yes.
But on that chemical level,
Right.
I think it's really important to help them understand exactly what's going on at a chemical level, because you have no control over that as a parent,
Exactly.
just as much as your child has no control over it. And I think that understanding really enables you to kind of get rid of that burden of thinking, oh my goodness, it was me. Oh my
Right.
goodness, I've done something wrong.
Right. Absolutely. Now here's something that I was kind of looking at before our meeting last week. I was just looking at this, and it says here on the APA that ADHD or ADD or other behavioral or other disorders on the behavioral spectrum are overdiagnosed in little Black boys. Black boys are known to be more hyperactive or may have more energy levels than boys their age, but still the overdiagnosis of ADHD and ADD remains to be an issue. And this is taken, everyone, directly from the APA website. It is an article clip from 2020. I want to know your thoughts on what is the difference, or how can a child, or how can a parent, or anyone, a teacher, or whoever, what is the difference between a child being an overly active child, little boy, and having ADHD or ADD?
I think recognizing the certain behavioral patterns, ADD and ADHD are short for something, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It's recognizing what kind of behaviors that child is displaying in what situations. There's the difference between someone being a class clown and making jokes and, wanting to have fun with their friends compared to someone that is unable to sit still, or someone that has a difficult time completing academic tasks in an academic environment because there's so much happening with their brain chemistry and the environment around them might be too overstimulating or understimulating.
Right.
So I think it's recognizing what behaviors are normal and what behaviors are abnormal in a certain environment. That's
Absolutely.
definitely key.
Yeah, I love how you said comparing your normal patterns to what exactly is going on. So like you were saying, it's a difference between somebody just wanting attention and being a class clown, just for an example, and then literally being unable to sit still and concentrate or complete the tasks that are given to them. And that's in a school setting, but even in any other setting. So I love that your suggestion is to pay attention to the baseline. What is the normal? What is the normal pattern for you?
Yeah. And to recognize the biases. It's very easy for a person to look at a Black body and be like, this is too much for me. I'm going to say that this child has ADHD. It means I can give them a pill and I can handle them. There's often this desire to want to control the Black body if it feels like it's uncontrollable,
Yes.
And that is such a big problem that a lot of our Black males specifically face in today's society. They are seen as over the top, hard to manage, and anything that gives you the opportunity to manage it without really putting pressure on you, that's a plus to a lot of people. And that's something that shouldn't go unrecognized, is the damage that we do because of those kinds of backwards ways of thought.
How might depression show up in a child? Because it's not always being in the room in the dark and not wanting to be bothered. How can a parent, what are some of the things that a parent or aunt or whoever, teacher can recognize and say an assessment may be needed?
It's so difficult because it's so dependent on the person.
Right.
Like I can say for me, when I was at my lowest, I was overachieving, getting really great grades, really friendly with people. And then when I was by myself, I was feeling really, really deep and really, really dark. And then
Mhm.
there were other times when I was absolutely chaotic and just off the wall, emotional, couldn't be controlled. So
Mhm.
it's so dependent, but I think drastic changes in behavior, changes in routine, and it sounds like such a difficult thing to recognize because you're living your day-to-day life and life is so fast-paced now. You aren't always going to be able to see that if you're a teacher and you have 35 children in your class.
Mhm.
It's hard to
Right.
recognize those
Mhm.
differences in a child's behavior because there's so many other things happening. The
Right.
same with the parent. It's hard
Right.
to recognize those minute differences. I think an open line of communication is all that you can have.
Right.
Making sure that your child knows that they have a space to come and speak with you if there's ever an issue, or you as well check in on your kids.
Yes.
It's so important, even if they're laughing, having a good time. Check in, make sure things are okay.
Mhm.
I'm a really strong advocate and believer in, even if things aren't going wrong and if everything's okay, a therapy session here and there never hurts. Giving your
Mm.
child an outlet that is safe for them never hurts. Letting
Absolutely.
them know that their voice matters is never a problem.
Absolutely. I love that, Penley. And I think that more parents need to hear that. There's such a stigma against therapy in the Black community, especially those of us who grew up in the Black church. Um, on a chemical level, especially on a chemical level. You can have all the church that you want, and God does heal and take away. And I'm not saying that He doesn't, but I do think that those approaches and relationships to therapy are very, very important. So thank you for mentioning that. I wanted to ask you a few other questions. Do you think, and in your studies and in your experiences, do you think mental illness is generational?
I definitely think there's a hereditary aspect to it. I definitely think that it might not always be very clear cut, but I think a lot of the experiences that our parents had, our grandparents had, our great grandparents had, definitely translated into the bodies of the people that are still currently present. I see a lot of my grandmother's trauma in my mom. I see a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
mom's trauma in my sister and I, you
Right.
know? And I mean, I don't have kids, my sister doesn't have kids. My hope is that if we do, having recognized that we carry that trauma, we won't continue to share it. Um, but so yeah, I think there's definitely a hereditary part of it, but then
Yeah.
there's also a kind of generational part of it as well that has a lot to do with the environment
Mhm.
and unfortunately things that we have no control over.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think a lot of times in our culture, especially as being Black men and women, we don't necessarily have the time or the luxury of taking care of our mental health, or it's not something that's talked about. Um, so I guess my other question for you would be, for those watching or those who may be curious, how can they introduce the conversation of mental health to their family? Because I'll be honest with you, there's almost this thing where like Black boys especially are not allowed to be depressed. Black women cannot be depressed. It's not real. I remember I
It's a
had,
luxury to feel sad. You get the day
yeah,
off because you feel sad. I've grown
exactly.
up in an environment where that has been something that's said. It's depression is a luxury. We don't
Yeah,
have the luxury or the time to be upset, to be sad, to feel our emotions.
absolutely. And so you think that how can one introduce the subject or the topic of mental health to their family or to their kids or whoever it is that they are supporting at that time? How can you introduce that conversation of mental health without offending someone? Is what I'm trying to ask.
I oh, whew. Um, this is like such a sensitive topic because it is such a taboo topic to talk about when you're
Yes, absolutely.
um, I think it's always dependent on if you're coming from a point of view of someone who is depressed or you're aware of someone within your circle that is depressed. But I think slowly starting to have discussions about mental health and speaking about like wellness, health and wellness is a part of mental health. Starting conversations with your people or with your circle about things that make you happy and things that you're doing on a daily basis to kind of keep your mental health at a positive level. Start talking about things that I like to do, things that make me happy, or what I do when I'm not happy,
Mhm,
recognizing that there are different emotions that we feel.
mhm.
And just talking about your emotions because that's not even something that we do.
Right. No, absolutely.
That's not even something that we do. So just starting
Absolutely.
to recognize that you're in a space where your emotions and your feelings are valid
Mhm.
and you should be able to voice that within your circle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'm a kid. I'm, 13, 14, whatever. And I go to my mom and I say, Mom, I think I'm depressed. What do you think? Because I think that when the topic of depression is presented to parents, they don't do anything because I think they don't know what to do. So I had a friend a few years back, and her son, I think, was maybe around 9 at the time or something like that. He had wrote a letter to himself about being depressed. Now he's just a little kid, he's only 9, so she didn't really quite take it serious. Well, anyway, he's 13 now, or no, 14 now, and he's experiencing some deep issues right now. And so this is not to fault or blame anyone. I'm just asking what really is a parent to do when their child, especially for single, a lot of us are single parents. What is a person to do when their child writes a song or a poem or they say, I'm depressed? How should they respond or react to that?
Open the floor. And I think
Mhm.
the first thing is recognizing, you know what, I hear what you've said. I recognize the words that you've used. You've chosen your words very carefully. That's
Mhm.
clearly what you wanted to get across to me. Can we open a line of communication where we discuss what is bringing you down or what are some of the
Mhm.
feelings that you feel that you associate or attribute to the word depression?
Good one.
Why have you chosen to use that word? What do you want from me? What kind of support do you want? What kind of resources would you like us to access?
Right.
Just listen. And I speak from experience. A lot of the times we're speaking to be heard. Not that we
Mhm.
want someone to do something. We just want you to listen. We just want the feelings
Mm.
and emotions to be
Yes.
recognized, you know?
Right.
That affirmation means so much. Just having someone sit across from you say, I hear you. What do you need from me?
Mhm.
Give them the floor and let them speak. It might take some time. Let them work at their own pace, you know? All you
Absolutely.
can do in that situation is be the support. That's honestly all you can do.
Absolutely. And that's something, right? That's all you can do, but it's something you can do. And I love that. I love how you were specific with the kinds of questions that you can ask because it's hard. It's hard being a single parent. It's hard just being a parent in general. And so like I was saying earlier, it's not a lot of times they don't want to ignore their children or they say go pray about it. That's not them dismissing their child. Maybe that's really the only thing that they know to do when their child is saying that they're depressed. That may be the only solution that they know. So I love how you pointed out other things. I want to ask you a little bit, just kind of flipping it a little bit to your studies. We're just getting ready to wrap up here in about 5 minutes. I want to ask you, what were some of, besides autism, because you mentioned that earlier, what were some of the undiagnosed communicable or communicable, disorders that you've seen that were undiagnosed in Black boys and Black girls?
So ADHD was a big one. I speak to a lot of women. I myself am a part of that community of being women that were only diagnosed with ADHD or ADD in their mid to early 20s. You know, when they've been dealing with this, like, you're recognizing these behaviors. People are talking about them and like, oh, you probably have ADD. Fighting for that diagnosis is a big one. Anxiety as well. I had my first panic attack when I was 14, and I was clinically diagnosed with anxiety when I was 24.
Wow.
So
all that time without the resources that you need.
Yep.
Wow, that must have been a very challenging time for you. Do you think that anxiety and depression specifically, just those two really, do you think that they can be brought upon our children, Black children, through trauma?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So trauma can cause mental illness in a person.
I definitely think that trauma can impact a person's mental health and well-being.
I see.
I definitely think that in terms of anxiety, maybe less of depression, your trauma can have a very strong effect on whether you have anxious traits later on. Like for me, my anxiety was brought on by traumatic experiences. I didn't have that anxiety before.
Right. Absolutely.
And I managed it quite well. Whereas for some people, it could be social anxiety related to just not feeling safe in a public space. It's definitely something that can attribute to things that you already have. I would rather say that.
Gotcha. No, thank you for that clarity. And so that leads me to a kind of another question here. So many times in the communities there are, and this is, I think, not just specific to the Black community, but all communities really. We experience traumatic things, but don't consider them traumatic. What are some, and I don't want you to, we would be here all day if we went through like, what is it, different traumatic experiences, right? But can you define what a traumatic experience is? And that can be totally textbook. It's okay. But what can a person, what are some common traits of a traumatic experience where where a person can say, this is something that was traumatic for me? Maybe 3 things that would classify an event as traumatic or as something that is, life-changing traumatic.
So first and foremost, I would say trauma is what you find traumatic. There is no definition. It is, if you sit there and you say that experience or that interaction was traumatic to me, it left a mark on me, what you say has traumatized you is traumatic. That, in my opinion, is how you would define a trauma-based event. It is what you, in your body, in your mind, in your soul, recognize as something that was traumatic to you. And that's going to be very dependent on who you are. But I think that's one of those things that is very much based on you. You determine for yourself what is traumatic.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't even be able to say what an example of that is in terms of a feeling, because traumatic feelings are different for everyone. What triggers you might be different. So I think that's the only way I would be able to. I'm sorry. That's the only way I'd be able to answer that.
That is a great answer. That still is an answer because you still gave it a definition, right? What was it to you? If it was traumatic to you, if it hurt you or changed your perception of something, and that could look different from anybody. That could be, what's traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you, and what's traumatic to you may not be what's traumatic to me. But what I hear you saying is that overall, it's definitely going to be specific to you, as well as your symptoms of mental illness are going to be very specific to you. But it's important to pay attention to what your normal is and then compare it to what others are maybe saying or others around you in terms of if there may be a mental illness problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of the times there will be behaviors that other people share. If you go on Twitter, you'll see people tweet and be like, my ADHD brain not letting me get a task done or something like that. Everybody has, I think, an overlap somewhere, or like depression. Like people be like, I cleaned my depression room. When you're in the thick of it, your room gets a little messy. Or brushing your teeth. That is a big thing amongst people that are dealing with like severe mental health disorder. Brushing your teeth becomes an obstacle. And that in itself is a behavior that people don't associate to major depressive disorder.
Right. No.
It's like, oh, you just didn't brush your teeth. That's gross. But for a lot of people that deal with major depressive disorder, brushing your teeth or forgetting to brush your teeth is a big part of a manifestation of a behavior.
Absolutely. And I think what I hear you saying, Phindile, is that because it is so difficult to kind of give everything a blanket symptom, a blanket checklist. If this is it, then this is this. If this is, I think what I hear you saying is, if you're unsure, see a mental health professional. Just when you're in doubt, or your child, if you are unsure if your child is really, have your child see a mental health professional.
Absolutely, because it's one of those things, and I think this is a big issue within the Black community, because it's so context specific or person specific. It's not rooted in fact, it's rooted in experience. And for a lot of Black families, that's not enough. What is your experience hold as opposed to what's being told to them?
Exactly. Right.
So I think that also is a big issue that plays into it.
And you know what, Phindile, as we get ready to get out of here, I have one last question, and you just put it on my mind. This is totally off the script, off the book. But I have to ask you, because you kind of just answered it, but I want to just be clear. Why are Black people and the Black church scared of therapy? Unsupportive of therapy?
I think there's so many aspects that play into it. I think, one, there aren't enough Black therapists. And so there is that level of fear and distrust in showing your most vulnerable side to a non-POC individual, for starters.
Okay.
Then there is the body and the Black body in health and wellness. The Black body has been excluded from healthcare for so long that as a result, there are just certain parts that we don't consider ourselves a part of when it comes to the health community. And I think that plays into it as well. Also, I don't know where it came from, but there's just been this kind of creation of fear and distrust and shame when it comes to you being a Black body that needs to reach out to someone else for support or for strength. Looking outside of your family or your network or your community for support is so frowned upon. Absolutely. And I'm not sure why that is. Absolutely. But for a lot of people, it's admitting defeat, it's admitting weakness, and they refuse. They are not going down. Like, the world has been so violent, so aggressive, so dangerous for our bodies. We're not going to stand here and say we give up now.
Right.
We've come too far for that, and I think that all of that experience, that generational trauma that the body has experienced for so long, plays into our fear of wanting to access help.
Absolutely.
And wanting to get support within our community. And we need to start breaking down those barriers. But where do you start?
Absolutely. And you know what, Phindile, I am so grateful for you. And I truly believe, to answer your question, it starts with being open to hearing and listening to conversations like this. Heartbreakers, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here with me. If you are interested in having a question read on air, which we will do in just a second here, please send it over to hp@heartbreakhillpodcast.com. If you want to know more about the wonderful Phindile, I will be dropping her LinkedIn profile information in the comments of this episode. Phindile, it was so wonderful, amazing, and outstanding having you. I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and I hope we stay in touch.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely to speak with you today, Rose. And thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Bye, Phindile.
Bye.
All right, Heartbreakers, you heard it. You heard what was going on here. Mental health in children is absolutely and truly very well. Before we go ahead and get gone out of this episode, I want to go ahead and keep true to my promise. Earlier this year, I had made a promise that I was going to start getting back to your questions and answering them on air. We were shooting for Wednesdays, but Heartbreak Hill Podcast is now going to be available on TV, Channel 17 on the Comcast network that is local for Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, okay? Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read our first question. This is going to be from Leslie in Tacoma, Washington. Hi, Leslie. And here is the question. Hello, Rose Gold. Thank you so much for putting your wisdom and understanding on air. I love it so much. I listen to your podcast all the time. Thank you. I appreciate you, Leslie. Recently, my daughter has gotten back with her baby's father. He is about 4 years older than her. I did not like him from the very beginning. And every time he comes around, I have an issue because I do not like how he treats my daughter. I'm old enough to know that he has started to use drugs, and I'm not sure how to get my daughter to see or know that this is not the man for her. Every time she comes around lately, she is wearing provocative clothing and very long eyelashes. And I am knowing that this is not my daughter's behavior. What should I do? What should I do to make my daughter see, know, and understand that this is not the person for her without breaking our relationship? Leslie, I want to say thank you, first of all, for tuning in and listening as much as you have done. And I appreciate the support. I want to say, Leslie, I wrote this back to her in a much more detailed email, and I can read it word for word at a different point in time. But the gist of it is this. You're absolutely right about everything you're saying. I have no doubt in my mind that you're right about her boyfriend probably not being the right man for her. I'm sure that you notice a difference in how she looks, how she dresses, and how she behaves when she's with this man. But I want to tell you that if you want any kind of influence in your daughter's life, the worst thing you can do is constantly be telling her what to do. And here's what I mean by that. You telling her that she needs to leave that man alone. You being critical of her appearance. It's only going to alienate her from you, right? They're having sex. And what that means is that whatever relationship you think you have with your daughter, there's a completely different relationship that she has with the person that she lays down with at night. And I don't mean to be vulgar, but I just want you to know we're talking about two different levels of influence here. He's sleeping with her. And it sounds like on a daily basis. You're the mom. So it's like, if you want influence, you're going to have to use honey to get it. Stop being so critical every time she comes around. If you don't like her clothes, buy her new clothes. And she probably won't wear them. But that'll keep her around more than you always being critical of what she wears. If you don't like her eyelashes, don't look at them. But commenting on them all the time is only going to make her not want to be around you. And as far as her boyfriend is concerned, the only thing that you can do to make her wake up is pray about that. Because God has a way of setting up situations where you will have influence. So, for example, your daughter may come to you one day for advice about what she should do. Or she may tell you about a situation and want to know what you think about it in regards to her boyfriend. God is in control of creating those divine moments where you give advice and he uses you to get across something that needs to be said. But you don't just go around telling people what you think all the time, even if it's true. You will be alone. You will be alienated. Leslie, I hope you got the deeper response that I sent to you. Don't forget, Heartbreakers, if you have a question that you would like to have read on air and have shared, we will be doing this in our weekly episodes because it's just not fair that I tell you guys to write in and I have not been able to respond. Go ahead, send us an email, hbhp@heartbreakhillpodcast.com. While you're at it, follow us on all social media platforms at heartbreakhillpodcast.com. I love you all, and remember, breaking hearts, blowing minds, one conversation at a time. Thank you so much for tuning in to Heartbreak Hill Podcast. Our mission here is to use multimedia channels to break generational curses in our thought process. Our motto here is breaking hearts, blowing minds, one conversation at a time. Please note that our entire production is brought forth by listeners and viewers just like you. Thank you. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our website at heartbreakhillpodcast.com.